Hello and welcome to the Procurement Central Session 1 on preventing supplier contract failure and mastering dispute resolution during such uncertain times. My name is Steve, but a little bit about me in a moment. I just want to set the scene with you and to share with you a little bit about the course that you've been good enough to engage with and to buy. We're running this in conjunction with Marcus Evans, the events and conference experts. There are other courses which we've done with Marcus Evans. In fact, one of them you can download from our website, procurementcentral.co.uk, and that is absolutely free, and it's called Smart Bids, and you can find out a little bit more about a different aspect of procurement with that course. But today we're going to focus on, for about the next hour, introducing you to this topical subject. Particularly, let's break the title down a little bit, particularly around the uncertain times aspect, which is really causing pressure on suppliers and their customers to change perhaps the way that they transact, change the way that there's issues, there's pressures, there are concerns on both sides, and that really adds to the mix of things when it comes to the contract that was put into place in different circumstances perhaps, and how people deal with that, and how you can deal with that, and how, more importantly, you can resolve it, preferably avoid it if you can, but resolve the situation that you might find yourself in. So this is session 1. We have 8 sessions. We also have a colleague of mine, which I'll tell you about in a second, who will be doing 4 of the 8. So you get different trainers, you get different perspectives, different people to talk about this particularly critical subject. But as I say, welcome to Marcus Evans in conjunction with Procurement Central on this course. You'll also notice a book cover, Contract Management Core Business Competence. We recommend that that is the textbook for this course, and that you acquire that you buy that through Amazon. You get yourself a copy of that. You can also get it from us. If you've subscribed to this course, we can send that to you free of charge, and you'll get a copy along with the course that you've purchased. So here are the profiles of myself and Peter. Peter will be taking the next session, session 2, and today I want to just set the scene, as I've mentioned, around core business competence of contract management. Why is it important? Why should we learn about it? Why should we be knowledgeable about the subject? And Peter has put together a book on this very subject, explaining to the procurement community and to business why contract management is not something we do, shall we say, as an afterthought or on the side. It's something that is right at the heart of the business. And in a moment, I'll share some examples of how we've seen contract management, or perhaps a lack of it, creating the business issues that some companies and some organizations are facing. But Peter and I have worked together in the past. Peter has been in procurement with the Civil Aviation Authority. He's also worked in utilities. I think it was with National Grid, and on electricity. He and I worked together in financial services organisations, And Peter is a renowned consultant and, of course, an author on the various topics of professional services, buying professional services, buying services for your business, how to deal with contract management, how to deal with sustainability of cost reduction. So Peter is an acknowledged expert and author on various subjects, deep subjects around procurement. So he's also, as I am, a member of the Institute, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. So, as I say, if you've subscribed to this course, then you will have already got the book that we'll have sent you, written by Peter, but check out some of his other books as well. You can get a download of a PDF book for free from us, Procurement Central, with regard to cost cutting and the sustainability of cost cutting. I have worked also in the financial services with AXA, a global financial services company, and I've also enjoyed working at big events like the Olympic Games. So I've typically managed as a CPO, a Chief Procurement Officer. I've typically managed about €1 billion spend in the past. So I'm used to some of the and many of the issues and the challenges that you will be facing right now in my career, and I can share with you a little bit around how I've overcome and dealt with some of those challenges. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and also hold an MBA in strategic procurement. So both academically and on a practical level, I've learnt my trade, I've learnt my specialism, and I've also practiced it. So let's go forward a little bit in the course and talk about what we're going to do within this next hour. We've got about an hour of myself talking, and then you can go on to session 2 and hear Peter talking. And Peter, you'll see on this slide that it says the 7 stages of pre-contract management. So just where it's faded a little bit, and what causes uncertainty. So some of these other topics Peter will be talking about in session 2, but I'm going to talk to you about why contract management is a core business competence, really introducing the course for you, introducing the book that we're using as the acknowledged textbook for this course, and setting the scene with you so that in session 2 and beyond, both I and Peter can go deeper once we've set the scene and prepared things for you. But all the time coming back to this notion, this issue that we have of our uncertain times, some people call it unprecedented times, when supply contracts are being challenged, when perhaps the wording that we've spent a lot of time on getting right, assuming that there's no ambiguity and there's no room for error, people are trying to, what they call, find wriggle room and to find ways in which perhaps the rules can be changed to suit a company who finds themselves in a challenging position during the uncertainty that's been cast upon them. So really the focus of our time together in session 1 is around contract management as a core business competence. A lot of courses, and this one obviously is not going to be any different in the sense of setting the scene with a definition. A definition is always helpful to come back to as an anchor point and our anchor point contains a paragraph of words here that flesh out why contract management is important, what it's all about. It's not something that perhaps is first to mind when you're talking across the business, talking with some of the seniors in your company, particularly a finance director might be interested in taking cost out, either in what they call business as usual, or indeed uncertain times, difficult times. They might be focused on cost reduction, asking you to take cost out of the business sustainably, but also, of course, as we'll see during our time together in session 1, it cannot be done. You cannot be taking cost out if it's becoming detrimental to the business, if it's changing the needs of the business, if it's changing the specifications that were put together, meaning that the products or the goods that you were buying were fit for purpose for the needs of the business. You must ensure that if cost is coming out, then the quality and the contents of the service level agreement and the contract itself are unchanged. So let's just have a look at the definition that we've put together for you around why contract management is important to the business, why it's core, and we believe is essential for the business, not just procurement, but the business to understand and, of course, to be engaged with. That means that they need to be engaged with procurement as much as procurement being engaged with the business. So the definition, and of course you'll always find that there's more than one, but the definition that we've chosen is as follows. It's a process of systematically and efficiently, keyword there, efficiently, managing contract creation. So the contract creation comes usually, you might think, after the selection of a supplier, the specification has been pulled together with the business, understanding that you are going outside of the company, it's actually a buy, it's an outsource, that you're going to select a supplier to deliver to your company. And the contract creation is really the wraparound of all the work that you've done to identify that you need something that probably adds value to your business and that an external supplier can provide that. And you now want to protect the value that you've identified. You want to ensure that that contract works effectively and efficiently. So contract creation, analysis, and now more importantly, execution, making sure it does what you hoped it would do when you started the process of looking for goods or services to bring into your business. And you want to maximize the delivery of the goods and services operationally, and that the financial performance is as you had budgeted, meaning that, yes, of course, if you can continually reduce costs, then that's great. But certainly you do not want costs to increase. You want to make sure that the budget you put together for the total cost of ownership that you identified is going to be sustained and controlled. And of course, we don't like, as we'll see soon, we don't like failure, we don't like having risks, and we want to minimize contract failure by minimizing the risks that we usually can identify at an early stage. And again, this course is all about not just being reactive, but being proactive, thinking about what we can forecast, what we can identify as probable risks and concerns that might come and upset and indeed really cause problems in the contract and in the service, which we want to make sure goes without too many problems. So continuing the theme of what is contract management, so we had a definition. There's certainly an uncertain period at the moment across the world. So if you're watching this and you're not in the UK, maybe you're in the US or other parts of the world, you'll certainly be aware that your leaders are being challenged. There's very few world leaders which are not being criticized in one way or another, primarily because, of course, taking decisions to get things right is very difficult to do, particularly if we've never faced such a difficult situation as we do now, meaning it's 2020 and we've got the worldwide coronavirus. So this is causing all leaders, all governments to do things differently and to think differently and to really change the way in which they do business, or adapt, if not change, adapt. So there's some key questions which are being asked and really go to the heart of the topic, the contract management, the contract, potential contract failures, and how can companies avoid such a thing, avoid supply chain on contract failure? How can they avoid that? How can they prevent that happening? Where does accountability for failure sit, and where does responsibility sit? An interesting question, you might think. Is that with procurement, who put the agreement in place, or is it indeed with the business who worked with procurement to put a contract in place? Or is it indeed, do we have a designated vendor or supplier relationship manager? How do we continue in the contract failure? How do we avoid disputes? And how do we find resolutions to those disputes and other challenges? So I'm sure that there's many more key questions that are being asked, but these are certainly some of them that we hear around this topic in the current time. So here we have those questions being asked around what is contract management. What really are we trying to do with a contract? So we had a slide previously that talked about some of the big questions about how we deal with failure or disputes. And here we have a slide that's saying what are the key things that make up contract management. And as you can see by the image, we've got somebody trying to balance that. We've got a set of scales there. It's a big balancing act. So here we've got really some of the core things to consider, and we've got things like quality, which is always at the heart of everything we do. If you book something that's cheap, that you're paying a lower price for, and you're getting the best price, you need to make sure that it's fit for purpose, that it's going to do what you want it to do. So the best example that we often use here is air travel. You certainly may feel you get a reduced price, But if the airline does not observe safety and other matter, reliability might be another one that you consider to be the core of an airline's product that it's selling you, then clearly safety and reliability means that you probably would have been happy to have paid more money to have got those things. So you need to make sure that you're looking at probably not just the price, but you're looking at the total cost of ownership. Get my writing as best as I can. There we are. Total cost of ownership. And within that, you get the quality and you get the services and you get the reliability and the safety. And usually these are identified with yourselves and a business owner, somebody who will assist you in considering what are the important things for a company so that you can put these into some sort of priority. Because what you see here on the die is that you want to make sure quality is one of those subjective things. It doesn't always have to be, I mean, we talk about safety with airlines, but you know, quality also comes into mundane things in our business life, in our personal life. And obviously it needs to be a suitable quality. So you could have a cleaning contract, and the cleaning contract could be, you know, a 7-star rating for cleaning, particularly with COVID at the moment. Everything needs to be high in the hygiene standards. But there are some things that possibly you can adjust the quality on, and you can just, a good example would probably be in terms of the maintenance of some equipment. So if you have a problem with your IT systems, for some people, getting that resolved immediately, let's just call that 1 hour, having a 1 hour resolution time may be absolutely necessary. Is it absolutely necessary for everybody in the whole organization? Probably not. So adjusting the quality of the response time, the urgency is something to consider. Not everything needs to be 7-star. That's my point. Because having a 1 hour resolution time will impact on the price. So you'll be already be expected to pay more if the call out time is urgent, is at that a very urgent time. So think about the balance between what you're asking for and what you're paying. Not everything needs to be what we sometimes call one size fits all. And also contract management, we will see in later sessions, is more than a static contract. It's more than what is already contained in the contract itself. We're always looking for continuous improvement, particularly where there's a collaboration, a partnership, particularly where the contract is what we might refer to as an A-class contract, where it's a contract that is critical to our business, either against risk or indeed the amount we spend on it. And things like continuous improvement, innovation can also come from a sound contract management base, meaning it then builds into supplier relationship management and partnership and can create new ideas, innovation, and so on. But think about contract management as a balance. It's not about, as I've said, one size fits all. It can be adapted to your needs, and it's certainly not all about, and very rarely about low about low price. It's about total cost of ownership and it's about the quality levels that you are seeking to be maintained. So the cheaper the price, there's probably a warning bell that should be ringing in your mind saying that that is indeed going to be a low quality provider. So continuing this introductory session for you, let's just think about some of the projects, some of the contracts, and that I've certainly seen, and some of the issues that they've faced. So building on from the previous slide, let's just think about critical contracts can fail and why they fail on budgets, time, and scope. And also, in my opinion, usually, and I'm going to be quite provocative in a moment about the current situation, and usually can be prevented. So scope is one of those things where you've identified, maybe it's in the construction industry, and you have identified in the construction industry that you're going to put a building up, a new office block, and the new office block is going to have 20 rooms in it with a reception. So 20 separate rooms with some restrooms to go with that. Over time, people, because a number of what they call stakeholders that will be involved, business people have different ideas. Over time, things change, and the scope of the work will also, or could also, certainly be challenged or have questions asked about it. Meaning that some people might want more restrooms and fewer rooms, or vice versa. They might want the reception to be larger, smaller. So people will think, they'll reflect on the original contract that you've put in place, and they may well want to change that over time, which means that the scope can change if you're not strong enough to debate that and explain to people why the scope is what it is. And that also can delay the contract finishing time, so it's late. And also because of those changes, it's highly likely somebody will be claiming that they're going to have to charge you so at least some administration costs, if not costs of specialists, meaning in this case plumbing, electricians, builders, roofers, etc., that they've had to delay them or lay them off or bring in different skills. So all things can change, and although this is, you might argue, project management, it's also a fundamental of managing the contract. Really what we're saying here is that the contract is a fixed view of what you will get in your business, of what people can really understand collectively across many levels. And it's the old adage, isn't it, about if you ask 100 people to give you an opinion on something, you'll get 100 different answers. So the contract is a very good way of standardizing on one view throughout the whole company for everybody. And it really brings people back to the baseline for them to understand why you're doing it in the way you're doing it. And it's a constant throughout the delivery of the contract and or the project, making sure that people are rooted in the decision that was made for very good reasons. But people leave companies, people join companies, people's opinions change. So this is why it's important to be very, very clear on why we're doing it the way we're doing, so that we don't get failure in the contract because of changes that will happen. To avoid any disruption to your business and supply chains, these contracts, it says there, must be protected. Certainly the contracts must be understood, and usually protected means that there's somebody who is disciplined and knowledgeable to make sure that the contract does what it says it should do. A contract also is bigger than its individual part. It goes towards assuring that supply chains operate effectively with a surety. So what we don't want is that because of any disruption or any failure in a contract, that can have a real domino effect, a knock-on effect to supply chains failing as well. And we've certainly been witnessing some of that in the health sector in the first part of this year. And having a contract with a supplier, including a service level and including key performance indicators, is what I would call your insurance. It's your insurance policy. If you think about insurance companies, you buy something, you put it in the drawer, you get on with your life, but when things go wrong, you hurriedly look at the insurance policy. Maybe it's a car accident or something's happened to your home, and you look at or you're on a vacation, and you look at the insurance policy to see what you were covered, what should have been financial coverage or compensation you can get. Well, having a contract, having a fit for purpose contract and a service level with an external supplier is your business, can be your business insurance. But perhaps unlike an insurance policy, it does require management on a frequent basis. So this notion of contract management plus supplier relationship management. Supplier relationship management is future vision, future benefits, but contract management is the daily work, the daily management, looking for signs, looking for trends, looking to see what, if anything, is changing in the environment or in the supply chain that might cause a disruption. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I'm challenging you perhaps by saying I believe 80% of supply chain risks can be identified, anticipated, and prevented through a contract. And then I believe that the other 20%, which can't be prevented, anticipated, or identified, can be resolved with an agreed planned methodology. So what I'm saying is future planning deals with 80%, brainstorming, research, analysis, gathering data will deal with 80%, and you can put in contingency plans for that 80%. And then the other 20%, you can deal with that with some sort of a dispute resolution. So I'm putting that out there, and obviously if we were live, if we were working together in a room or virtually, we'd be having an informed discussion about that right now. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you agree that you can do that? I believe you can. And the reason I believe you can is illustrated a little bit, although not in every aspect, is illustrated a little bit by this slide. So the woman, the fortune teller here, looking in the crystal ball to see what she can see about the future. And what do we see? Well, sometimes there's an expression, isn't there, about we look to the past and we look to history to predict what the future might hold for us. Although, of course, past performance is not always an indication of the future, but it's in some degrees a combination of analysis, and certainly looking backwards is part of that combination. So some of these dates might resonate with you. We've certainly, a lot of us, maybe it's my age, but certainly a lot of us will have heard about the Great Depression back there in the 20s and 30s. We'll have heard about that. We'll have heard about certainly recessions, and inflation was pretty much out of control in the 70s. We had things like strikes going on in the country, people asking for more money. There was, as I say, real inflation problems. We then saw in the 90s that we had banking crisis going on and into the 2000s. And of course, now we have, which of course led to recessions. And now we have, of course, the pandemics, which are not just with the COVID-19 strain of coronavirus, but they have raised their head. Ebola, the bird flu, SARS. So we've had a number of situations clearly that have not got the better of us to the extent where we've had to choose to go into lockdown and change our way of life. But we've certainly had some big warning signs of viruses. And in fact, both Barack Obama and Bill Gates are quite public in their forecasting in the 2000s that a virus would be on its way. So it's not completely new to us or completely a surprise to us. We know that something periodically, or as you see from those dates, whether some of those dates have different reasons, but we know that there are big events that happen in the centuries that cause really disruption to our financial disruption, which causes recessions and possibly depressions, and they come at fairly regular events. So yes, we don't know exactly the date when something is going to happen. We don't know exactly the severity of it, but we can say that our thought process when we're doing risk assessment should be thinking and considering in the way that somebody like an actuary does in an insurance company, what will the future hold in the next 5 years? Yeah, and I say 5 years because that's for a partnership for a significant contract. 5 years is a typical period to have a contract. So let's just consider forecasting ahead a little bit. So you can forecast risks using a very simple model, likelihood and severity. And the example I usually give, if we were together in a classroom or in a conference facility, is to talk about the likelihood and severity of driving your car or a car in a city centre, what is the likelihood of you having a car accident or a bump with another car? And I would say that's quite high, just because of the density of working in the, operating in a city, in an urban area. But the severity, because it will probably be 20 miles an hour in most city centres, the severity will be quite low. It'll be a bit of a shock, you'll be a bit upset, you'll be late, but you won't be having any severe damage to you or your passengers in the car. You can identify that things will happen in the future. Now, this will help you with your contingency plans for the next crisis. And they might be disaster recovery plans in office blocks. We had certainly in the years that we were looking at a moment ago, there were terrorism, there were disruption to our businesses through protesters, and people needed a contingency plan, a disaster recovery plan for where to go. And there was a building set up with PCs, and you could go to different offices if yours was affected through one of these disruptions. So having plans in place, thinking about how you classify some of your goods and services. Sometimes you think that they are very low and very insignificant, what they sometimes call non-critical. And really considering the current crisis and viewing those categories in a new light. Are they really as insignificant as we probably thought? Or indeed, and a good example of this, of course, is the protection equipment, the PPE, which we probably thought was a consumable item, low cost, and really would not be high on a director's radar. But now, of course, it's deemed one of the most significant failures, if I can say that, one of the most significant failures from a supply chain perspective to dealing with the current crisis, particularly in hospitals and care homes. So how we viewed that, how we identified and classified that category, and we probably would not have had, in fact, I'd go as far as say we didn't have as a country, or indeed across the world, big contingency plans for low non-critical items like PPE equipment. So instead of being completely or negative about using the words failure, let's have a think about what the signs of good look like. So what are the signs of, I've called it contract management mastery. So what are the good signs? Well, arrangements for service delivery continue. So what we mean by that is things continue. Things continue in the way in which both parties understood and both parties signed up to, and that was designated to happen, as we've said before, an agreed price, agreed quality, and an agreed time. So these arrangements contained in the contract continue. They don't stop. They don't get watered down. They continue to happen. So keyword there. So that's what good would look like. That means that if we do have disruption, it's not really affecting us. Bills are being, invoices are arriving, they're being paid. You know, the core part of our business is continuing because the core contracts are continuing. So that responsive point is a good one. So beyond the contract, beyond the business as usual, the day-to-day, the core part of the contract, we also are seeing the supplier who's being responsive, who is also giving us sometimes beyond the basics of the contract. So they're continuing to cooperate, they're continuing to respond to our requests in a timely manner. They're not going absent from the requests and the requests that we're making. The other thing as well is that we, as a customer, also not just understand our obligations, although that is a big part of contract management, is making sure that we have shared the message across the business, what we have signed up to. Some people think it's all about the supplier and that they should go beyond some of the things which are contained in a contract, some of the items that are contained in the contract. Sometimes in the training profession, you get asked to be a consultant, and sometimes you do it through goodwill, and sometimes you may say, actually, that's a slightly different skill set, it's a slightly different rate card, etc., etc. So we have to, as a customer, it's important that the customer, to avoid disruption or indeed failure or dispute, that the customer understands what its obligations is under the contract and where they need to step up, where they need to assist. So a typical problem is forecasting. We saw the woman, the fortune teller with her crystal ball. Unfortunately, in business, we don't all have a crystal ball, and the the supplier will not always know what you want as a customer. So if you're not communicating, if you're not having regular reviews, if you're not advising new, or indeed any changes, but forecasting the future to them, it's no good running up to the supplier if failure occurs, pointing the finger of blame, which is very easy to do, and I think we've probably all seen that. But it's very much a case of working together, as we saw a moment ago on the slides, to avoid misunderstanding of the responsibilities, either with the contractor or with the customer. We don't like, maybe for our birthdays and for our religious festivals, we like surprises. We like to have a nice surprise. But in business, surprises usually come with a problem. They're usually caused by a problem. So we like to, and in this course, you'll see how we predict the future and we avoid these surprises, that at least we know. It's better to know that something is occurring, something is coming at us, and that is probably, we're hearing that a lot as a criticism of some of our world leaders who should have known better, should have known earlier, should have taken decisions at a faster pace. They waited too long. They didn't shut down the incoming air flights, etc., etc. So the more we know, the more we can prepare ourselves in a contract with the contingency plans and alternatives. So having a big surprise means also making sure that your business is aware, that people in the business are aware, because getting a phone call from somebody in a very high position in your company asking you about a problem is not a great feeling, is not a great call to take. So having those, so at the least being prepared for it, and preferably having escalated that around the company. So avoiding disputes and surprises, let's avoid them. But let's get some knowledge about what's happening and what's coming, and we're going to be sharing that later in the course with you. So, and obviously from a supplier and a buyer point of view, you know, making sure that we're open and honest in our communications is going to help us do that. And here we've got probably two people. We've got one person on the right in Hillary Clinton who probably thought she was joining a debate with certain rules of a debate, certain Harvard principles about how to have a debate. And we've got Donald Trump on the left, who didn't abide by those rules and was a very different player in a debate and had a very different agenda, and was more successful, well, given that he was elected, I suppose, more successful by using those approaches and those games that he played in that debate. Within business, what we want to do is we want to be able to talk. We want to be able to trust each other when we're having a conversation. We want to be able to share things and get things, be candid with each other and get things out in a debate on the table. Because if the contract isn't working, if we don't think it's fit for purpose based on changes in our social or political sphere, then we do need to have that conversation, what they sometimes call difficult conversations. We need to have that, and we need the flexibility to do something that's different and that's better for the long run. So sometimes it's a case of taking a deep breath, but not being, not, as I've said before, not playing the blame game. And of course, the number 6 in terms of signs of what good looks like in contract management mastery is that sometimes you'll hear this expression, and again, it will come up in this course in one of our other sessions, win-win, that you're both getting something, you're both getting what you hope to get out of it. Now, what you had hoped probably in terms of the amount, maybe it's a financial gain, or maybe it's going beyond the services that you had hoped you would get from a supplier. Maybe that has to be pared back a little bit. Maybe that has to be adjusted. But you still need to make sure that it's good business, because if it's not good business, if one side is clearly suffering and hurting and is not finding the agreement, the contract, a success, then you will find that there will be a disruption caused and later dispute. So good looks like having benefits, having the objectives that both sides signed up for realized. So we're coming to the end of the introduction session. As I've said, this is very much an overview. This is very much the telling you a little bit about some of the themes that are coming up. So we've got a tick already in why contract management is a core business competence. And Peter in session 2 is going to talk to you about the different stages of what we call the pre-contract management. And he's going to start gradually getting into deeper conversations with you, deeper discussions, some examples that he's going to use to illustrate the causes of uncertainty and the kind of analysis that we can use, some of the modeling, some of the approaches that we can use to prevent supplier failure in the past. So I'll be around. I will be coming back to you at different sessions on the course. But session 2 is over to Peter, Peter Salmons, and Peter will be giving you his introduction and then certainly starting to take you deeper into the course. So thank you for listening, and I'll be back with you during the course.